With hospitality now reopening in London, you may be in the unfortunate position of having already cancelled your face-to-face trade tasting, or worse still, in limbo about whether or not to go ahead. If you're struggling to safely recreate your trade tasting online, I'd love to see if I can help. My evergreen online trade tasting service lets countries, regions and producers reach the trade at a time and place of their choosing. Applying the experience of recording tastings with more than 160 producers, I will ensure that the stories and production details are heard by your target audience in an engaging way without the friction of an in-person tasting. Safely meet and exceed the objectives of your scheduled trade tasting with an online product that delivers more. Write to me, Interpreting Wine founder Lawrence Francis at hello@interpretingwine.com to learn more. Today's episode of the podcast is a Phinca Hapa special with Melanie Hickman of Struggling Vines. Melanie is based in Rioja, Alavesa, close to the village of Bhilar, and the Phinca Hapa wines are sourced from vineyards she owns and produced by winemaker husband David San Pedro Gil of Bodegas Bhilar. In this episode, we hear the Phinca Hapa origin story. Melanie talks of the transition of the vineyard from conventional to biodynamic agriculture. She talks soil and how its composition changed over that time. Before a tasting of the Hapa White and Hapa Red wines from 2016 and 2018 respectively. Enjoy.
Prior to moving to Spain, I had a dog that his name was Hapa. And Hapa in Hawaiian means mixed blood. So he was a mixed breed that I had rescued in Hawaii, and he lived with me for 10 years in Hawaii. And I was going through all the paperwork. He had some heart issues. I was going through all the paperwork to get him here to Spain. And pretty much right before the move, he died suddenly. And in the end, it was more or less his heart. So I was really, really, really distraught. And I don't think David had ever seen me quite so distraught because I'm generally speaking a happy demeanor for the most part. No one's perfect. And so he, I think, just to make me feel better, said, one day I'll make a wine in honor of Hapa, you know. And so, of course, I was like, really? And I was just thrown by the idea, and I thought it was so wonderful. And then I moved here, and it never happened. And it never happened, and it never happened. And so one day we were walking around, because at that time, we didn't have children. Our life was maybe a little bit easier. And we were walking around. Plus, we just like to really check out vineyards in the area. And we were walking probably up there, down there, up this way, and he was telling me, that's LVR, yeah. That's where we live. And so we were just walking up, and he started by telling me, you know, this is an old Roman road and all that. And I remember when we had first met, before we were even married, we were hiking once in the mountains over there, and he pointed out the plot that's right above this and said one day, you know, he'd like to build something there, and he thought these vineyards were very special. But as we walked by, I don't know, for some reason that day I was really taken by what I had seen, especially when we got up to the top. Because, well, I guess a little point is my dog was white. And I also think that I've always been kind of smitten for David's, the way he makes white wine, the style that he makes white wine. So when we got to the top, I saw, and that day, it was a dry day, so the soil was beaming white. And at the top, it was a super sunny day. It was probably, the sun was high in the sky. And then I saw all the white grapes, because if you look at this vineyard, if we go up a little bit further, pretty much all of that is white. So half of the plantation is white grapes. And then the bottom half is planted with the red. And he started to tell me a little bit about this vineyard, and started to tell me how it was planted in 1967, and when he was a little boy, you would look out this side of the village, and no one planted vineyards going up the hill. They only planted from the village going down to the river Ebro at a lower altitude. And so he felt that there was something special, but I really fell in love with it just for a number of factors of how much it called out to me. And so I jokingly said, this is Hapa's vineyard. Yeah. And and so it was kind of an ongoing joke for a while, and I had told him I will buy that vineyard one day. And by one day, I meant 20 years because I didn't have any money. So I ran into the owner at another point in time and kind of, again, half jokingly told him that one day I would like to buy his vineyard, and he kind of laughed at me and sent me on my way. And 2.5 years later, I come home. My husband says, "You're never going to believe who contacted me, the owner of Hapa's Vineyard." And he said he'll make you the first offer. So I asked David, "Well, what are we going to do?" I was so excited. I said, "We can't let this go. What are we going to do? What are we going to do?" And he said, "We aren't going to do anything because all of our money is invested in the winery and the land and everything that's surrounding that construction." Because at the time, that was just right when we were going to harvest the first time in the new winery. So just like this, so we aren't going to do anything. If you want to buy the vineyard, you have to find a way. Yeah, you have to find a way. And so I don't know. There was something inside me. I couldn't let it pass. So I started to talk to some friends that are financially more savvy than I am, and I asked them. I had what is my 401k in the United States, my retirement savings in the end, that I had been investing in for probably 18 years at that point, because I had always worked for corporations and things like that. And I asked him, what did you think? And he said, "Do it. It's land, it's vineyards, and your husband's a winemaker. I don't think you can go wrong." And so I took that money and I invested in this vineyard. This was the first vineyard that I had purchased. And we immediately converted everything to, we don't do a slow conversion. We just converted everything to organic, of course, biodynamic. I was actually asking David the other day if this vineyard had ever been worked by tractor. I think the only time that I can remember having a tractor in here was to put the trellis system. Yeah. So we don't put a trellis system for production. It's more to protect from the winds, because you know that the winds come really strong from the north here. And so in some of the vineyards we do individual poles or individual sticks for every single vine, but we can't do that in every single vineyard. So where we can't do that, we put this trellis system, and it's really just to hold up the vegetation so we don't have to prune so much, and so it doesn't break when the strong winds come. But anyway, so this vineyard is obviously really special to me because it's the first vineyard that I had purchased. I've purchased a few more since then. But so anytime there's return, then I use it to purchase more land and invest more in the land. But
this is amazing because, we're standing right here in the vineyard, and you're, essentially telling us the story of the vineyard and, your personal attachment and about Hapa. And, I know where this is going to end up because we've, back at the vineyard, we've got the wine. But I think it's a really unique opportunity for me, and I've never really done this before, is just to speak to somebody, to kind of recollect and recover, I guess, those early years of the vineyard, because you knew it, you knew you wanted it, you got it, and you brought us up to there in the story. What then? Just give us a sense of over those following years, what actually happened when you did cut off the vines from their supply. What was kind of happening, post 2015 here.
All right. Anyway, okay. So what happens when you cut a vineyard cold turkey is, of course, vines die. So you see examples here that we had to replant some because we don't wean any vines off. We don't go slowly reducing the chemicals because we're making wine and not selling grapes. We don't care so much about the quantity of grapes. We obviously care more about the quality of the grapes. So if a vine dies, we'd rather deal with that and then eventually replant, because again, we're not selling by the kilo here. We're making grape, we're making wine, and so for us it's just a matter of making sure we have the best quality. It's funny because when you talk to David, when you talk to Alfred, who works with the horses in this vineyard, I think this vineyard seems to have recovered really, really well. They'll always say, David and Alfred, and when you're walking in the vines, if you care about them, you can feel the energy that they give back. And so with this vineyard, it really seems to have shown that. It seems to, because before he was a conventional farmer, and not only that, he was a nice enough guy, but he is your typical, he inherited it, so he was just putting chemicals, following a chemical structure or agenda 100%. There wasn't a lot of care. It was a business. It was a way to make money. And actually for him, he didn't value the white grapes that were planted here. For me, that was amazing. I love the fact that the whites are at the higher altitude and in the poorer soils and all these things that can just really give the quality to the grape. And for him, that the previous owner, he didn't care. So I feel this vineyard, you feel its energy and how much it appreciates giving everything back, because we've done our best to take care of it and really bring it back to life. And so while some have died, we're very, very happy with what was left over and everything. It's just, and I think it's become one of the favorite, at least of Alfred, to work for that reason. He always just says he feels like a good energy in this. But
So I mean, I love the fact that you just bought it on spec, really, on the color, and that was kind of what meant so much to you. But as we're standing here, this is, I think, a great time to talk to the soil. Yeah. What have you, I guess, then learned about the kind of the soil composition, but then maybe also bringing that back to the vines. What is sort of the interplay that's kind of going on there, and that things you've noticed and you've seen developing over time.
Well, with the soils here, so of course the bedrock of all of Rioja Alavesa is limestone. So you can just assume limestone. But interestingly enough, with this vineyard, it has a lot of chalk in the makeup. And one thing that we've noticed, and when we taste the wines, you'll see there's something about that transferring to both the red and the white. So it's weird. That texture comes through, that chalkiness comes through. It almost can feel like a tannin, but we always feel like it's something from this vineyard, because we don't find that texture in all of the other wines, only in this one. So for me, it's really translated a lot to that. What we find here are, even with white, which white, can be a very productive grape at times, but even with that, it just seems to maintain, and sometimes it will produce these amazingly small berries that are just beautiful. We let them get, if you ever see photos, they'll get almost like an orangish tinge when they're in this vineyard. And it will produce, and it has most of it is Rioja here, a little bit of Garnacha Blanca, a little bit of Malvasia, probably more Malvasia. And it's just every year it gets better, this vineyard. It really does. But one of the other big changes that we have seen in the actual soils of the vineyard is, when prior to getting the vineyards, of course, like I said, they were with tractors and whatnot, but using the horses, so the soils are much, much, much less compact. They've seemed to aerate much better now, and so they're much less compact. And also some weeds that were here prior, because they're weeds that grow really deep into the soil, we've been able to eliminate those just by changing the soil and the makeup of the soil.
So here we are. So we've moved down from the Hapa vineyard. We're down in the winery, we're down in the tasting room, and we've got the Phinca Hapa, the white, and we've got the red in front of us here. So now it's, take us into the glass and, fill in any other sort of, blanks around what that evolution that you've just taken us through, how that then shows up in the glass.
So actually, when I was thinking about what I wanted from this vineyard, I wanted a single vineyard, first of all. I wanted to show and express the land and the terroir from this parcel. So I also wanted, knowing that Bhilar is really who we are, and that's what David had started with, and then I, of course, came in later, I kind of wanted, the Bhilar wines are often, there's longer aging, and they have a spiciness to them and all that. But when I was telling David what I wanted out of my wines, and of course I help him make the wines, but he is the winemaker. I mean, he is the one that studied everything, and he is the magic behind everything. But he also, it was like something that we came to together. I told him what I wanted with the red and the white, but he also knows my style and what I like. So here we have the white. This is kind of a funny story. So before I'm trying to think if I had even bought the vineyard at this point. Maybe I had. Regardless, it's not relevant. We were in New York City, and we were talking about actually 1,000 Mills at the time. And the sommelier, David, like I said, he's very technical. When he's not a good salesman, but he just will tell the people the technological thing, or, how the wine is made. And this so he said, so I make my white wines the exact same way I make my red wines. And that's always what I had said as well when people would come to the winery. And the som looks at David and he goes, oh, so it's an orange wine. And David looks at me as if I'm going to know, because this was in 2013, I think. And he looks at me as if I'm going to know what that term was. And at the time, we both had no idea. And he said, I don't know, but we bring it in, we ferment it with the skins, and we press it, and that's it. So we left and we Googled it. And I said, well, I must love orange wines then, because that's always what you've shown me, and I must love orange wines. Well, long story short, that's not necessary. You can't say that about anything. You can't say you love everything. And so for what I thought I loved is not necessarily true, an orange wine. So technically, we never label this wine. We never say it's an orange wine. But it's funny how my misunderstanding of what an orange wine is, I guess you could say it is an orange wine. You see the color. It's quite unique. It's more of an amber color, but what we do here is when David and I were going around and around about this, because then we tasted some other wines that we weren't necessarily fond of, that had long maceration with the skin and things like that. So what we decided together was what we would do is make a wine that has skin contact just like all the others, but it has a longer time with the skins, but while still being protected while undergoing the fermentation process. So what we did with this wine is we made a carbonic maceration white wine. So the enzymatic process, it's whole cluster thrown into concrete tank. And so the enzymatic process is happening. It takes much longer to ferment, but you still have that chemical process that's protecting it. And rather than leaving it with the skins when it's, that process is done and then the bacteria can come in. So it was our way of coming to, okay, maybe a longer time on the skin, but not when it can get to that funky, but what you find here, I think what you'll find is very aromatic. I think in this winery, what you'll always find are clean wines. Are they always 100% what you expect from Rioja? Are they always 100%, are they going to be easy for every single person to enjoy? They're more out there, not in a bad way. They're clean, they're correct, but they're pushing that border of rebel. They're pushing that that line, that border of where how can we make a wine that's different but still correct? How can we express something in the land that without manipulating anything and have fun at the same time? So so what we did here then, and after the fermentation was over, and sometimes actually even a little bit, because it would take so long. Sometimes, I think the first year it took about a month and a half for the fermentation. We didn't actually let the fermentation end in the concrete tank. We then pressed it and we put it in barrel. Now the wine spends a year in foudre. So and it will finish its fermentation there in the foudre. So, and then that's it. Once, after about a year, we bottle it. And with this wine, there is no sulfur added except for prior to bottling.
A little bit of context as well, because I've just looked up, and my first visit here and the first time that I produced a podcast on Bodegas Bhilar was actually episode 3. So this being, into the 300s or 400s or wherever we sort of get to, that I think, shows, really, for me how sort of special this place is. And, it's really got it's always be a founding member, I think, of the interpreting wine, and so special to come here. And, I did go up to the vineyard last time, but we didn't taste this wine. And it's then all the more special. It wasn't available. It's all more special. And I remember you saying last time around, it must be an orange wine. Now I love orange wines, and I can totally get that. I just think I've had too many orange wines that they shouldn't have been made that way.
Right.
maybe the grape shouldn't have been so long in contact with the grape juice there, and there's too tannic and it's not balanced, and it's, you know, at the end of the day, it's a drink. It's something to be enjoyed and a pleasure. And you want to go back to it, and you want I think to just have a nice time with it. And what I think is just, you know, it's a really overused term, but I think this is one of the really rare occasions where sense of place. You know, I'm as you were talking there, I was happily sniffing this, I was happily exploring this, and it's what I call a 3D nose. It's almost like you've got like a print of that vineyard and of, you know, the life that you see there, the vegetation that you see. You know, it's not a dead soil. This is a soil with character. It's a vineyard. It's a place. It's a whole system here with character, and it's like that wine captures that on so many levels, and it also then has the, you know, just it's delicious, and it's something that you will go out there and I think tell the story of this place and your story to the world, basically.
Yeah, moving on to the red. So, as I mentioned, this vineyard, it is the largest parcel we have. It's almost 3 hectares. And at the top is the white, and at the bottom is the red. So, it's a majority Tempranillo. And by the way, in the white, it's Rioja, Garnacha Blanca, and a little bit of Malvasia. In the red, it's Tempranillo and a little bit of Graciano. And this is what the vineyard gives. So, what we did here was we bring in the grapes and we put them in concrete vats again and whole cluster fermentation again. Once it's finished fermenting, we put it in used barrels for almost 2 years, and it's really, again, like you'll see, you've tasted our other wines, and this one has more of a lightness, more of a freshness to it. It has a nice tannin, but one thing that you'll see in the red and the white is that chalkiness that you feel on the palate. And so you'll see it with both the red and the white. But this one is, for our red, nice and has a lot of fruit. Fermentation in concrete tank, and then whole cluster. And then once the fermentation is finished, we press it and we put it into 500-liter used oak barrels. So while it spends almost 2 years in used oak, for me, granted it's used, but you don't feel the presence of the oak.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me there, I'm loving this journey really that you're taking us on, because to me, you just nailed it there. I mean, I don't really need to, I think, add anything over and above that. I just think the idea really just coming and is front of mind is just Rioja. It's just like where we are. And it just feels like, I think a lot of people, they think they know Rioja, and you know, Rioja's got a fantastic history, you know, because here you're using the grapes that they grow here. You're not, you know, using anything different. You're using still the wood. You're using the 500 versus the 225s, but it's just a completely different, again, representing the place, but it's just, you know, this is equally Rioja, isn't it? This is something that, you know, I think just face deserves, and it's almost, that new face kind of is the old face. That idea of, you know, the kind of the less you do, and you know, kind of stripping away, I guess, some of that oak influence and some of that kind of winemaker influence almost, and you just have something arguably just more transparent and just more, again, just more true to the place, but also I think the people behind it, and you know, you and David, you know, working together here.
Well, and that's true, because in a lot of what we do is, we always say we don't do things like our father's generation. It's more, we always look back to our grandfather's generation. So how his grandfather used to work, because that was before all the chemicals. That was before tractors. You know, that part of the reason that we use the horses is, yes, it's better for the soil, and yes, it's great for biodynamics to have the animals in the farm and this type of thing. But some of it, honestly, when I first met David, that was one of the conversations that we had before we even knew each other, really. And he had told me that he remembers his grandfather working in the vineyards with horses, and that it was something that he wanted to bring back in his honor, because there's this whole long story about when his grandfather passed away after the horses died, et cetera, et cetera. So some of it was also, I think, I don't know if Debbie will admit it or not, but I think part of it was also romantic and a homage to his grandfather who did that and loved animals very much, and that's what he used to do. And they also say, if you talk to the people here, they'll say that back then, the farming was much more intuitive than what it is now. Now, and that's what we want. We want to get back in touch with the farming that was intuitive, the farming that you had to actually observe the land and see. You had to be there, you had to walk it, you had to, walk each aisle, and you had to observe and see what's happening, and then take whatever it is that you need to do to correct if you see something that's going to happen, or hopefully you get on top of it in a natural way, using biodynamic, the homeopathic treatments are generally what we would use, but this type of thing, it's a lot about observation, and it's the same thing in the winery. So while we don't use a lot of the modern, like we don't use stainless steel in the winery, we don't use many of the 225. Some of our wines we do now, and it's always French oak. But really, if you look at the structure of our winery, other than the fact that it's not in a cave and things like that, it's old Rioja. It's before they had technology, which would be stainless steel. We don't have temperature control in the winery. We use things that like they used to back then. So again, even with the wines, while we're making the wines, you have to be very intuitive with them as well, and be on top of everything and know the process and take care of it when it needs to. But otherwise, let the wine really make itself.
Thank you so much, Melanie. It was an absolute pleasure to tell the story of Phinca Hapa. And I think this episode really shows the care and attention that shows up in each glass. Do please see below for the website and Facebook page of Struggling Vines. Additionally, if you're in the UK and would like to know more about these wines, I've left below the details of Moreno Wines, who Struggling Vines are working with in the UK. As an added bonus, if you hear this in time and you're based in the UK, Moreno Wines have their portfolio tasting on Tuesday the 25th of February 2020, at which you can meet Melanie and try the Phinca Hapa wines. If you're new to the podcast and haven't done so yet, please do subscribe over at interpretingwine.com/listen. And as ever, I would love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter, and email hello@interpretingwine.com. See you next time.